Okay, so but here now, Anne, I'm gonna ask you to put on, your whatever you want to do, predict, your special sorting hat or your crystal ball, whatever your preference. But if we're going to have the semifinals and then the final, that means that there are four teams that are going to be awarded the opportunity to play on national television. If you had to guess, just based on what we know of the rosters right now, as we are here, what is it, the 29th, right? December 29th, 2020. What four teams do you predict will be on NBC Sports playing in the Isobel Cup finals or semifinals in 2021?
Do you want me to give my seeding prediction or just the teams?
Just give me the four teams and then I'll ask you about the seeding. So you get a little bit of time to think about it.
Okay. My four teams are Boston, Minnesota, Toronto, and then Dark Horse, Connecticut.
Oh, okay. Sticking with Connecticut. I like that. Okay. Let's start with Boston and Minnesota. I think those are pretty spot on predictions. I'm interested to see how much how the 2020 season and what would have been the 2020 Isabel Cup weigh into your 2021 predictions.
Oh, it went into it so much. I think both of those teams are so hungry because they didn't get the chance to fight for the cup last year. Like, not only were neither of them named the winner, but they didn't even get the chance to play the game. And but they both won their semifinals, so they knew they were going to the cup, but they didn't get the chance to actually physically take the ice and battle it out. So I think those teams are just going to be so hungry for more, and I think they're a lock for at least a semifinal. Maybe not against each other, but a semifinal spot will go to each of them.
Wouldn't it be like slightly cruel, but also highly entertaining if they did face off in the semifinal?
Yeah. I don't even know what would happen in that scenario because I think they were both two really good teams. So I honestly don't know what would happen if they faced off in the semifinal. I think that'd be a really intense game of hockey.
I think I'm kind of rooting for that. One, because, as someone who is set to call that final, Sam Fryman and I were supposed to be on the call. Like, I can only imagine. I know like the slither of disappointment that I felt as a broadcaster. So I can't even imagine as a player that had put in that much time. And then, of course, you had that the Boston Pride, and this is something that Anya Packer got just slightly wrong in her 2 minutes or less. The Boston Pride was nearly undefeated last season. And who beat them? No other than the Minnesota Whitecaps, of course, at Tria Rink, which is the Whitecaps' home ice. So these two were really on a path that was going to be electric for fans. So I completely agree with those two picks. And again, I think having them go up against each other in the semifinal will just add to the drama. And then there's also, of course, the piece that you mentioned in your 2 minutes or less, much less actually, which is that if either one of those teams wins the next Isabel Cup championship, they become the first ever NWHL repeat champions. So I want to put that out there. We're going to keep that in the parking lot just for a short time because I want to get to the other two teams that you mentioned. One was the Connecticut Whale, which is the only Founding Four team that has not claimed the Isabel Cup yet. But then you also mentioned the Toronto Six, which would mean that they would become, if they advance to the final and then win the Isabel Cup final, they would be only the second ever expansion team, which of course there's only ever been two expansions. So there you go. But they would follow in the tradition, if you would, if it becomes real, in an expansion team winning an Isabel Cup in their first year. Do you think that that could potentially happen for the Toronto Six?
As much as I think it would make for a great story, I don't think they'll make it to the final. Like I think they'll battle hard but lose in the semifinal. Like that's just my prediction. So if any Six fans are listening or any of my friends who might work for the Six are listening, like that's just my prediction. I'm not cursing you or anything. I'm just saying.
Okay, so in our mind, or at least if we allow my dominating thoughts to prevail, we get the Boston Pride and the Minnesota Whitecaps in the semifinal, which means then we would get the Connecticut Whale and the Toronto Six in the semifinal. And then if we then completely switch minds into your head, you say that the Six is not going to make it, which means then
They
by
lose to
process of
Connecticut.
elimination, that the Connecticut Whale would edge out the Toronto Six to make it to, this would be the first ever finals appearance for the Connecticut Whale. Do you think that that is a probability for 2021?
I think it definitely is. I think they've built such a strong roster in the offseason with so many new pieces that I think it's a legitimate possibility that they could make it to the final for the first time in franchise history. Like I would not put it past them.
I mean, I like it. I like it a lot. I think that that gives us storylines, of course, of the founding four team. The only founding four team that has yet to win Isabel Cup is in contention for the cup. They knock out the new kid on the block. That's exciting. But then that means that, if again the semifinal is Minnesota versus Boston, then now let's go back to that series. Theoretically, in our completely made up odds, having never seen any of the teams hit the ice, who do you like better in a semifinal for 2021? Boston as they're built right now, or Minnesota as they're built right now?
I think Boston. I
Ooh.
just think they're returning so many players from last season, and all the players they're returning were absolutely dominant last season. And then they're adding their rookie class, the rookie draft class. I just think there's no way that they don't advance to the final this year.
They made a bold step and traded up for that first pick, Sammy
Yeah.
Davis. So, hungry for the cup, right? I believe
Mhm.
that is now they've continued that slogan from 2020 into 2021. I agree with you. I think that Boston, um, that roster was really gnarly last year. And it's looking pretty fierce this year again. There are some players that I've noticed are missing. Of course, Emily Fluke, who has always played really well at Warrior Ice Arena. Of course, that's a moot point because she wouldn't have played there this season anyway. But she has signed with the Toronto Six. So that's really interesting to me. You mentioned Kelly Babstock, originally signed with the Toronto Six. Of course, Connecticut Whale fans know Babstock very well. She
Mhm.
makes her return to the NWHL, signed with the Toronto Six, excuse me, but then was traded to the Riveters. I have a feeling that had to do with COVID restrictions to
Mhm.
travel and whatnot. That's just a theory. I haven't talked to Babs at least about that, but now is on the Riveters. And Babstock used to battle the Riveters, man. I remember those days. But that does mean that you have Babstock and the Riveters, and then the now Taylor Accursey led Buffalo Buttes on the outside looking in. So, what can you say though about those two teams, the Metropolitan Riveters and the Buffalo Buttes?
Okay, well, I will say that part of my semifinal predictions were based on bias. So I do think that the Riveters and the Buttes this season have built, like this offseason, they've built some pretty incredible rosters. I know they've welcomed so many new players into the fold on both teams, so many impressive players that the competition, the playing field is going to be incredible this season. But I think there are some players on both those teams that are going to fight and make sure that I'm wrong. They're going to fight to prove me wrong. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be exciting. The one wild card here, of course, is this season. The teams are only playing each other one time. So it's essentially like the newest format, because the first Isabel Cup championship was a series, both the semifinals and the finals. That has now switched to it's a one and done. But now it's essentially the entire season is one and done, and then you go into the playoffs. And that could mean especially with a season that is constricted by COVID, and you don't know how injuries or, unfortunately, even positive tests could impact a roster. I mean, this is going to be a mad dash to
Mhm.
the Isabel Cup final.
I don't even know, like, I think anything could happen at this point. Like, even just trying to narrow down my list of who I think won't make the semifinals and who will, I was like, okay, like, I think these teams are going to make it, but that means these two really good teams aren't, and I don't know if any of that's going to be right. Like, there's no way to tell because everyone's gotten so good and built up such good rosters in the off season. It's like there's literally no way to predict anything just because everyone's so good.
I know. It's fantastic. I can't wait. I'm like a kid in
Me
a
too.
candy store. So we've mentioned some big names: Taylor Acursi, Madison Packer, who's still playing. You think of players like Jillian Dempsey, Kaylee Fratkin, Shannon Doyle, who is returning, but says this is likely her last season, which just breaks my heart
Mm-hmm.
into pieces. Of course, you were one of the first people I saw write publicly that one Corrine Bowie might be a wonderful addition to the Minnesota Whitecaps, which of course came to fruition. Bowie won a championship with the Boston Pride in the inaugural season, won another championship with the Buffalo Beauts, and had a fantastic game to upset the Boston Pride in the second ever Isobel Cup championship. Now is taking her talents back home to Minnesota. She being, of course, from Edina, Minnesota. But I'm going to take Bowie off of the table, though. I want you to think, Anne, about some players that either are new to the league or maybe are newly returning with different teams that you think first time fans should really keep a keen eye on in the N double.
In terms of goaltenders, I would say Abby Ives and Carly Jackson are two that I know I personally am really looking forward to watching play because I've tracked their collegiate careers a little bit and they were both lights out in college. They were incredible. In terms of forwards, this one is kind of like she doesn't really count because she took a year off, but she's coming back to the same team. Rebecca Russo. She's
Mm.
of course going to be such an offensive firecracker for the Riveters once more. Um, Soroya Tinker, obviously, she is going to have a huge impact on the Riveters as a defender. Um, MJ Peltier is going for the Buttes. I know I'm sticking to like Buttes and Riveters here, but they're just some of the names that are popping into my head right off the bat. I think they're all going to have tremendous seasons, and I would definitely keep my eye on them. Oh, and Carly Jackson's former teammate Teresa Vanisova for the Boston Pride. I would
Mm.
definitely keep an eye on her.
Okay, I like
Sorry, that
it.
was a lot.
No, that's fantastic. I love it. I love it. I tell you, someone else I'm really excited to see hit the ice again. And maybe just more so, I should say, be able to watch her games is Sheann Darkangelo,
Mm-hmm.
who has played for the Connecticut Whale, the Buffalo Beauts, has played in China, and now is finding her spot on the roster for the Toronto Six. We also saw Michaela Grant Mentis, who had a fantastic rookie debut for the Buffalo Beauts, but now is going to remain in her home country of Canada to play for the Toronto Six. I think that's exciting. You really can't understate, though, the energy that Digit Murphy is bringing to the Toronto Six as first president, but now announced as first ever head coach. There's so much history that comes with Digit. There's such a philosophy that is such a Digit Murphy philosophy when it comes to women's hockey, and I'm just really excited to see how that's going to play out in a wobble, or excuse me, in an N double, I should say, for the NWHL season.
Yeah, same here. I mean, she was what, the winningest coach in D1 history for a time period there with I think it was Brown.
That's right.
And that just she's bringing that record, and then she won Clarkson Cups. She could become the first coach to win, not the first coach, but another coach to win the Clarkson and Isobel Cup. And I don't know. I think that's a real wild card that's going to give the six the edge in the end double.
Interesting. So you think she could join the ranks of a Bobby J, eh?
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Of course, Bobby J coached the Boston Blades of the now defunct RIP CWHL, but also then transitioned over to become the head coach of the Boston Pride and win the inaugural NWHL Isabel Cup. Also, though, I should say Jack Brote.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah, that's who I was thinking of
that's who you were
originally.
thinking of.
Yeah,
Okay, that's right. I was like, actually, we've got two. Be the first woman, though. That would be
yeah.
one Digit Murphy. So we love to see it. Love to see it. So again, there's so much excitement around the NWHL. I think we're just going to have you back in to talk about more WOHO. Of course, we didn't really touch on the PWHPA. We didn't really touch on NCAA. There's so much exciting women's hockey happening. But if you had to summarize, I gave Anya 10, but Anya just does her Anya thing and you just absorb it and take it because it's all fantastic. But 10-ish. If you had to say like 10 defining moments for the NWHL in 2020, like what would be some of the things in your top 10?
I would say the Whitecaps upset of the Boston Pride would definitely be up there. Um, I would say the Kelly Babstock trade would be up there just because we don't see a lot of
For sure.
trades. So that one was just kind of out of the blue, to be honest. I woke up and I was like, what?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I would say also the Boston Pride trading up in the draft to get the number one overall pick, which they then used to select Sammy Davis. That was a huge one. Um, that's three.
You're doing good. You're doing good so far.
Do I have to come up with 10?
You can come up with however many you think suits.
Okay. I would say the Connecticut Whale's first win. That was a big one.
Big one, for sure.
Oh, well, this was 2019, I guess, but Taylor Accursi's 4-goal game,
Oh
that
my
was
gosh.
incredible.
That was wild.
I don't even know what to call that. Like, what do you call it when a player scores 4 goals? Like
Yeah.
an Accursi trick?
A cursey trick, right?
I think that's what
We
we should
need,
start calling it.
yeah, let's do it. All right, Mike. We're talking to Mike. We're talking to Alyssa. Y'all come up with something for us. We're gonna go the stats gurus on that. But I think you're right. We need an ism. We need it to be named likely after Taylor Kersey. But then Buffalo still lost that
I
game.
know. Oh my gosh,
So
that was like I would put that as one of the defining moments of the past year-ish, like the outdoor game, the Buffalo Beliefs Classic.
mm-hmm.
I'd put that as a defining moment. And then I might squeeze as a separate moment a Kersey's 4-goal performance, just because like
Fair enough. Those
so
are two
much
separate
energy
things.
and action at that game that and didn't someone get ejected from that game too?
It's
Or was that
very possible when you have the Buffalo Buttes
yeah.
versus the Metropolitan Riveters. It's quite possible. I know that there were multiple Rivs players in the box at one particular moment. That was also the return of Ashley Johnston to the ice.
Yes. That's probably another one of my moments. And now she's gonna be assistant coaching the Riveters. So I'm really excited
Fantastic.
for that, to be honest. I think she and head coach Evo are gonna do just a terrific job.
Yeah, I think that has the potential to be a very well coached team. With Ashley Johnston being an OG Riveter, made her return to the ice. That was fantastic. I unfortunately was not able to be there in Buffalo. I was there was a Connecticut game. I think it was earlier in the day. But being able to see that moment was fantastic for sure. So you're doing pretty good. I think we're at about 7. So how would you round out the last 3? All of 2020 is up for grabs. We'll count the 2019 season as part of 2020. We'll just do it that way.
Okay. That one game where Sam Walter made like 70 saves. That
Oh
game's
my
definitely
gosh.
up there.
Sam Walther. Just like all of the goalies in the NWHL
Yeah.
ever. Like, what?
And I remember being so sad that she wasn't going to come back this season.
Yeah, I
Ugh.
know.
But the Riveters aren't at a loss. Like they have Tara Hoffman and Sonia Shelley, and I think that's a pretty formidable duo. So,
For sure. For
I
sure.
mean, they're both one's a rookie and one has one season of experience. So that's going to be a little shaky, but I think they have the potential to do it. Like I would not be surprised.
Sonia Shelley looked good for Connecticut, but of course, Mariah Fujimagari now joins Brooke Waleko
Mm-hmm.
at Connecticut, which that was like an under the radar signing.
Yeah. Yeah, I was so surprised by that. I remember I was talking to Juliana Nikoch and she was like, "Oh yeah, she's not even supposed to be on the website." I was like, "Oh,
Well, well,
well,
well,
okay."
there it is. Okay, like let's go.
But I remember Dan Rice reported on that a little earlier and said that she was practicing with the Whales, so
Yeah,
kind of makes
Dan's a
sense.
good follow. Gotta
Yeah,
gotta
for
go
sure.
with Dan. All right, let's think about business news because I think you still have two more spots. Like from a business perspective, what are some of the announcements that you think have the potential to really launch the NWHL into the next, its next phase, its next chapter of growth and development?
I would say definitely the switch to the governance model. And then I would say, well, can we would you count the appointment of Ty Tumania in with that, or would you say that those are separate things?
That's interesting. Were announced together, so I feel like it definitely makes sense to pair them. But this is our like we created this game, so we get to make the rules. Whatever
I feel
you
like they
say
should be
goes.
separate.
Okay, then they're separate.
Okay. And I think that's 10, isn't it?
There you go. You got it.
Wow. I'm surprised I managed to come up with 10. There's impressive things that happened this year.
Yeah, there was a lot of news. There was a lot of women's hockey news. And again, we're only talking about the NWHL right now, but I think we have seen some momentum. And what always fascinates me, I sometimes joke that at the time, Danny Ryland seemed to have like 9+ lives because there are just so many hurdles that the NWHL has had to jump through. Some that, if we're being honest, were self created and
Mm-hmm.
others, especially given what we saw at the end of the 2019-2020 season, that are just impacted by the market or in this case coronavirus. But the NWHL always kind of finds its way, and I'm always excited to see what that means for the future because we're still looking for an opportunity for women's hockey players to exclusively play women's hockey. And we really don't have that model in women's sport. I would argue the closest that we really are is in tennis.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really for your upper echelon players. But when it comes to team sports, we're still waiting domestically, at least here in the United States, for the opportunity for women to have a league that will compensate them as their primary job. So we'll see. I think the NWHL is making strides. The PWHPA has its model, and but I'm excited. I'm excited for what the future holds for women's hockey.
Me too. I think there's so much to look forward to. I mean, you can focus on the hardships, the negativity, but there's also, when you look at it, there's so many things to be excited about, regardless of who you want to focus on. There's exciting things within every organization, whether that's the NCAA, the PWHPA, or the NWHL. There's just so much happening and so much excitement that you can really focus on anything you choose to.
And that's what's fantastic. Certainly as a fan turned now a journalist, is that there's so much to take in. And again, going back to the stats, once we establish a really solid baseline and really great people, whether it's Bo or Mike or Alyssa we've mentioned, or Megan Chaika or a number of others, once we really keep that consistency and we as the collective women's hockey environment really tap into those resources, we're just going to be able to see the breadth and wealth of experience, of knowledge that exists in this space. And I'm always excited to see how that then permeates through the entire hockey community, which we, of course, have already seen with the likes of Florence Schelling, Blake Bolden, who you know I love to mention, and on and on. But Anne, I want to give you final say, last words. We've talked about the NWHL, but are there any other things that are exciting you or things that you want to re-emphasize, things that we didn't talk about here that you think are important for especially new fans to keep in mind when it comes to the NWHL?
This is kind of like a little out there, but it still does relate to the NWHL. But I would say keep an eye on the NCAA just because those are the future professional women's hockey players. So many players came from the NCAA. Even the players that came from internationally, a lot of them got their start in the NCAA. And I would say to keep your eye on some of those schools in the ECAC and Hockey East and the WCHA, even in the CHA and the NEWHA. I would say, sorry, that was a lot of acronyms, but keep your eye on the NCAA and you might just find one of your team's next greatest stars.
I love that. Talking about that pipeline that we want to establish for when there is, again, professional women's hockey, where it is the primary um, occupation of those who are in the league. So I love that. But Anne, we have to make sure, I am going to make sure to link for everyone. I don't know if I point here. I think I point here versus here. I'm just going to do this. We're going to make sure we link to the 101 that you have done. So that's a great resource. And we want to make sure that we promote that. But also, where can viewers and listeners find you?
You can find me, my bylines at the Ice Garden on Twitter. So that's just THEICEGARDEN, just the words the Ice Garden. But also you can find me personally on Twitter at Anne Tokarski. That's Anne with an E, Tokarski, TOKARSKI.
Excellent. It's always such a joy to talk with you, Anne. I cannot express enough how thankful I am that you are a part of the women's hockey community.
Thank you.
And of course, of course. So always want to make sure we hype up the next generation. You know, auntie, as they call me, certainly in women's basketball, but I think it's shifting over to women's hockey as well. But you know, I've been around, done a few things, but I always love to make sure that we're uplifting those who are consistent voices, and you and fit the bill when it comes to women's hockey. So thank
Thank
you
you.
so
I
much
appreciate
for
that.
your time. Yeah, of
Yeah, thank
course.
you for the honor of having me on. I'm so excited. I'm just really excited and I want to share that with everyone. So,
We still like the idea of the snow globe, and I hope the NWHL has some fun with snow globe type themes and maybe filters or whatever the heck is going to happen.
oh my gosh, if they sold like literal snow globes, I would buy one for every team, I
Every
think.
team, easy. And then one just for the league overall.
Yeah, just
So
one
that
in general. Like I would have like an entire like snow globe shelf.